Hello, and thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. Quick stamp sketch here. I say quick, that's relatively speaking. I'm calling this a stamp sketch because I wanted to try out that pigment ink on glossy cardstock in terms of adding in a light beam. I suspected it would work, but I really haven't done this type of thing before. So, that being said, I just stamped out a quick composition using, a couple of the tree trunk trio. They were nice solid images. I needed something kind of bold, to do this quickly. And then I added in some extra foliage using the oak branch and a few other trees. I wanted a fairly dense composition here because I needed something to run across with these light beams. Okay, so the more solid and kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say this composition is cluttered or anything like that, but you can really put in, I think, just about as much as you want, because by the time you start adding in these light beams like this and I did it with the Colorbox pigment ink and just a sponge, and masked it with a couple pieces of paper, I mean, this is something where these light beams really become the star of the scene, I think, so no matter what you have going on in the background, if you have these beams kind of rolling across it and coming out from the background to the foreground, it really changes the spirit of your compositions by doing something like that suddenly. I mean, talk about visual lead-ins. I did a video on that, but when you have something like light, that really, or a real crisp, defined light source and beam like that, it really draws you in, to, whatever focal point you want. So, again, that's why I added in, so many of these objects, around this composition, because I knew that I'd be laying these down and it would kind of be subduing or making somewhat secondary the images, So I think it really becomes about the light beams, but the objects there in this scene are there to kind of really enhance the end result, which I had hoped would be light beams in the form of Colorbox pigment ink, white pigment ink, applying without any problem over the glossy. And I really didn't know. I mean, I've used pigment ink on glossy a lot, but I just didn't know how it would look in these beams right here. So I kind of play around with it, and this is the first one that I've done in in glossy. So I have a long ways to go in terms of experimenting around with some different looks here. And what I found was, I think playing around with the amount of pigment ink that you use, so the relative density of the pigment ink looks good. I think, it's nice to kind of vary the amount of ink that you're using to describe and define these light beams. So you can see this one here, there's a lot of pigment ink, and up here there's very little. Okay, because I did like two beams that were really similar, and I thought, it looks a little monotonous. So on some of these, I just masked a piece of paper like this, and I discontinued the beam a little bit in some of these, like here and here. A couple of them go all the way out towards the edge of the page, and this one right here, I just kind of laid down a mask like this, and I just put very little pigment ink there. So I think this, that kind of variation, okay, looks good in there. Otherwise, it's a little bit too monotonous in terms of heavy light beams coming out everywhere. Okay, it didn't look so, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word natural, but maybe that's the word, Otherwise, it looked, I guess the other way, it looked a little bit more too mechanical or something like that with those harsh masks like that. So anyway, this is a pretty quick composition here. I mean, I didn't spend time, doing it in color. I think, you do it in color and you're adding this entire other element that would look really good, but I wanted this one just to be fast and quick, and I wanted to get the light beams really fast. So, we're talking about a composition here that took, I don't know, along with the coloring, 15 minutes or something like that. Maybe, I'm not really quite sure, but anyway, it's quick and easy and fun, and as I say in this video, I think you can use this light beam effect for anything. You know, the holidays are coming up. If you want to have a tree, you know, with glowing, or, you know, an angel or something like that, and a dramatic sky with some beams coming down, you know, or this illumination, backlit illumination, you know. I think something like that would be really quite effective. Or I was saying, I mean, you can use these light beams in here for just about anything. You could have word stamps in there, you know, not in this scene, but something like that, and I think it would look just fine. Or it would, you know, not only look fine, but it would add a certain type of dramatic effect to it, you know, that really directs your eye to whatever is being backlit, you know, so you can really, really be the lighting director of your piece, okay? And just get the viewers to look at whatever you want with that type of dramatic lighting within a given composition card or whatever you're doing. So anyways, if you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it, and as I say in the video, I hope you kind of play around with some of this different type of kind of approach to the usage of your, you know, pigment ink. It's just so much fun, and it's just a really dramatic look, in my opinion, that's quick and easy. You know, two things that are not bad in stamping. Okay? Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for watching the channel. Okay, quick stamp sketch here. I want to see if some of the applications of media that I've been playing around with over the last, I don't know, a few weeks will apply to kind of a glossy cardstock surface. Okay, I've been doing it on matte paper. And specifically, I want to try something with some light rays, okay? So I'm going to just do a quick, you know, what I call stamp sketch, and I just want to see how some of the pigment ink will apply over the top of the glossy cardstock and dye-based inks this way. I'm going to see if the pigment ink will kind of apply and stamp out and stick, I guess you could say, to, you know, a coated surface like this. And if it does, then we are in business as far as a certain type of look that I want to kind of play around with, and that's kind of some dramatic kind of visuals as far as light beams go, okay? I've always done kind of a reflected light type of thing. Sometimes I've done, you know, there have been beams of light, but we'll see what it looks like here. Okay. Now, I just stamped out the tree trunk, and I'm stamping out the tree trunk trio here. And I'm going for a little bit more of a dense type of application of these images, okay? Because I want to have plenty of objects within the scene for the light rays to kind of cross, okay? So I'm probably making this a little bit more dense than maybe I normally would, you know. And again, this is more of a stamp sketch. I'm not going to be too careful about my placement and whatnot. I just want it, I want it full. I was going to say cluttered, but maybe that's not the word for it. Okay. And, you know, I'm not going to worry about color in this one. I just want to see how that ink applies here, but I want to lay down my imagery first. Okay, those are some trees. You can see you can create a nice full forest that way. And I'm going to stamp some of the, kind of like a canopy of foliage in here, okay, in the form of this overhanging tree branch. This is called the oak branch. Might be mixing and matching a little bit here. These trees are probably more of the pine variety, but this will work just fine for this application here. Okay, I just want it full. I was looking at some different scenes recently. So one of the photographs that I had taken, and you know, in order for these light beams to kind of come in here and to be broken up by all kinds of different foliage and branches hanging down, we need to kind of create a, you know, a reasonably dense kind of foundation for that light to kind of come in. Now, I'm thinking I'd like some kind of base down here to stamp on, so I'm going to go get my, let's see, my sedge filler, unless it's, where's my sedge filler stamp? I think I need to go grab it. Okay, we have additional foliage here. I have my winter brush, leafless pines, and some tiny rocks here. Okay, I'm going to put this sedge filler down here. You can see you can just stamp it right over the tops of the trees, and it's not going to be any problem stamping it right over the top of the tree trunks. The tree trunks are dense enough of an image where a light image like that can just stamp right across them, and you don't need to do any masking. Okay, now this is the leafless pine, and maybe I can get a few little background images with this. I tell you what, let's do this one in a little bit of a less than black impression. So I'll take this, blot it off, okay? And hopefully this comes out a little bit lighter as an impression. Okay, something like that. Shall we go for 2 and see how it comes out? Let's give it a try. So this is really the third impression because I blotted it off once here, so that's the second impression. This is the third impression. And I think that looks pretty good. It's lighter right in here, so it appears farther back. Okay, dare I? Okay, I'm going to go for a 4th impression. Okay, hopefully that's really light. Okay, and it is. It's just kind of fills in there. It's almost too light, but that's all right. I'll make that area in there a little bit darker anyways, so I think it'll be a kind of a non impression in the end. Probably won't even be able to see it. Okay, I like to get a little bit of texture in my scene, so here's some the tiny rocks stamp. Okay. It almost looks like mushrooms or something like that too. Or it could represent that. I don't know, if you're ever doing this and you're doing this in color, you can color these like a dark brown and it could represent some mushrooms underneath the tree, and that would be interesting as well. Okay, let's see. Let's keep this winter brush for the end. Maybe I'll stamp a little bit of foreground in here. So, remember, this is a stamp, sketch, and experiment. So, as I describe what I'm doing, it's more of an investigation than instructions. So, just kind of keep that in mind. In fact, you know, just so many of my latest videos are just that. It's kind of a, or is a, you know, it's an investigation of media. Okay, now where am I? I'll have my light rays coming out from like right in here, so I'll try to keep that area in there a little bit lighter. Or I could come this way too. Maybe this area right in here is really light since that impression was really light. And I'll come this way. I'll go right to left with my light rays. I haven't really done that too much. For some reason, I'm always doing things, from left to right, like we read. Okay. This is a Memento London Fog. It's a gray. Okay. Now, one of the things too, I'll kind of oscillate. I want, some of my surface area a little bit lighter, okay? So I'm toning in. Now, before, on my other experiment with light rays, fairly recent video, what I did was I kind of avoided a certain area, so the area that I avoided became the path of light. But on this one, I'm going to be physically adding in a light or light rays. So I don't need to be too careful about this application right here, but if you do want some of your kind of forest floor illuminated, I think it's better just to leave it light, okay, than to tone everything in and then have to reclaim all of that lightness that you kind of removed, okay? Now, that doesn't have to be a complicated concept. It just simply means just don't tone everything in, okay? See, like this, I have a little bit of light coming through there just because I'm adding a little bit of tone right here, okay? And where you leave it light, it doesn't matter as much as you might think, When I'm looking at a scene like this, I mean, there's no telling how much foliage there is up there and where light would really fall. You don't have to think about it that way. You're just saying, hey, light is falling right there. Okay? That's what you're doing as the creator of your lighting scheme. Okay? You just simply define where things are light and dark, okay? And it should make sense, because when you look at if you looked at a scene like this, in a photograph, or if you were there in real life, I mean, who's to say where that's going to be, It could be wherever you want it to go. Okay, so we have that. It's coming along pretty fast because this is really quite a minimal color application scheme, and it's not really color, it's tone here, but kind of when you work in kind of a monochromatic method like this, it's really easy to do in terms of any type of time expenditure. This will, as far as this goes, as far as I know right now, these will be the only two pads that I use as far as the inking process. So we're already halfway done. And I say that with a little asterisk there because I don't know exactly what's going to come up from this, so we'll see. Okay, I can kind of darken my shadows a little bit in here. Remember to kind of retain that light that you established there by just not going over it with ink. And I'm toning in kind of one side of my tree here. I mean, it could be the whole tree if you want to, too, Who's to say it's not in shadow, Okay. Going up this tree trunk right here. If you're doing this in color, you can be using variations of brown, different values of brown if you want. Okay. Alright, I'll go for my perimeter, or the four corners in a little bit of tone. Okay. Kind of has a nice atmosphere already, you know. That's just, you know, this grayscale monochromatic piece. I'd always recommend doing something monochromatic once in a while, because I feel that when people don't have to, I used to do this in my workshops, I would, in the first scene they did coming out back out of a break, a lot of people took the first class and second class, Snapscaping 101 and 102. The first one was kind of getting compositional structures down and learning how to tone in their scenes using the dye-based glossy paper technique, and I'd show them how to lay out their pads, you know, just in a very simple manner, just starting from light and working dark, okay? And, you know, that was, by the time they got in their second scene, they were, you know, cooking. And then they would, some people would do as many as, I think in about a 3-hour workshop, people got as many as about 5 compositions down. A lot of people did 3, you know. Depends how long they took on their compositions. They could stamp out whatever they wanted to. I didn't work them through anything specific. I think maybe the first scene, I might have had them stamp out a specific scene just so they didn't have to think about that too much, and they can just kind of concentrate on their color application. But, you know, by the time that second scene came around, I would say, okay, now try a different color scheme other than the one we worked on first. But anyway, what I'm getting at is the second class, what I did was I had them start off with a black and white, you know, or just a grayscale color scheme like this. Okay? And I thought that was really good to do because what it did was it really gave them control over their darker tones, okay? Using a lot of black like this. And when you have control over your darker tones, you know, it's easy to apply the lightest ones, you know, you're not going to get any, you know, marks like this or kind of, you know, unintentional marks, okay? Because it's just so light, so you can kind of do whatever. But if you can do this with, you know, your darker tones, okay, it really gives you a lot of control over things like this tool, your sponging method, and touch, okay? And it also helps you to control how much you lay down on your paper. And that way, when they do that, first of all, it gave them a really quick scene. But after that, it gave them a lot of control over their darker tones. So when they went back to the color work, you know, in terms of using the darkest of colors, they had a really easy time after that, you know. So it was a really great exercise in kind of a color application control, or the mastery of, you know, color application. Okay, so that is that. Now, let's see what we can do here as far as some light beams, or if this is going to work at all, okay? So we're going to grab our color box Frost White, okay? And we're just going to start defining some light beams, okay? I'm going to have the light beams kind of starting from right here and coming down into the scene, okay? So I'll have it coming across some of these. Maybe it can go like this, you know? Maybe I can just designate one area that it's kind of coming from, and I can have them coming both ways. Well, let's give it a try. Maybe. Okay. So I'm just going to pick, okay, I'm going to say, I'll make this little space up here my focal point, okay, there's this little kind of a break in the, I'm just choosing one point, okay, like right here, and that's where I'm going to have my light beams kind of emanating from. Okay, I need a second piece of paper. Here, let me see. Okay. I'll do something like that, okay? There's some light beams like that. Before I start this may not work at all. But it might work well, I don't know. We'll see, okay? I fully expect this to be a translucent application of tone, okay? Meaning, we'll have some, let me see, is there a, okay. Here's what I need to do. I was just about to go over the whole thing, but I have that tree there, so I'm going to put some of these beams behind the tree and some in front, okay? Okay. I put a little bit right there. I'm going to wipe it off. This is the beauty of pigment ink on glossy papers. It just kind of wipes right off if you don't want it there. Okay. That looks pretty good to me. Well, let's just keep going. Let's add some more. Let's see. Okay, and again, kind of watch your foreground imagery, you know, the ones that are going to be in front of the beam, and don't go over it. Although, like I said, you can, if you do that, you can just kind of wipe it off. But this is a lot easier than that other one that I did, where I kind of had to pre-plan it, and I didn't apply so much tone around the beam. You know, it's so much easier to do it kind of after the fact, like that. The other one's a little bit more organic, maybe. But, and one of the things I noticed too, sometimes when you're doing this, is light beams don't always extend everywhere. Like, it's like there's some breaks in the beam, you know, too. Like, there are branches that kind of get in the way, so maybe I'll just apply like this ray here, and it won't be complete, okay? It just kind of, this one here kind of fizzles out, right? Okay. So we'll have more of that fizzled beam, okay? Okay, let's see. Let's try some on this side. For dramatic effect. Hopefully it looks dramatic. I'll have this one kind of fizzle out a little bit. Okay. That kind of fades off right there. Might need another one. Let's go with a narrow one right in here. I gotta say, okay, now these beams are looking a little bit too symmetrical, so I tell you what, I put a little bit more ink on one of those and it looks a little bit better, so I'm going to just mask that off like that. And I better mask out the bottom part too. And we will we'll kind of vary that beam a little bit where it's a little bit brighter on one side, and let's do that with both of them. I'm learning, I think, as I go on our experimenting. I need to kind of vary the beam a little bit in terms of its lightness, okay? Just so it isn't so uniform. Uniform is okay, but sometimes uniform can be a little bit monotonous. Okay, yeah, it looks a little bit better now. Okay, let's see. Let's put one coming, wipe that off. Okay. Let's go down. Let's do this. Let's come in here. Let me try something here. I'm going to do it where I just have my mask on one side, and I'll try to create just an irregular beam, okay? Where it's not so defined on both sides, or well, one side will be completely undefined, but you can just kind of get a hint of this beam here. Okay, something like that. Yeah, that looks pretty good right there. See what I did right up here? Let's do the same over here. Okay, come across. Yeah. Okay, so kind of learning a little bit here, making some things a little bit more irregular. Okay. What that does is we start to kind of develop a little bit of a variation based on a theme, which could potentially work, or not. You see here's like a half beam right there. Okay, it looks more realistic, doesn't it, that way? Or I don't know. Maybe that's not the word. Maybe it looks a little bit more natural, perhaps. Okay. Can you think of these beams, you know, if you're doing holiday cards and if you have a little angel or something like that in the sky? Beams coming across, right? So can you think of all kinds of other applications of this? You have a word stamp right here or something like that, happy birthday, and put some tone around it. Beams coming out from it. I mean, wouldn't that add potentially a lot of drama to your pieces? I mean, it would really kind of pop it and make it really stand out. So I don't know, might be kind of interesting. I would play around with this. And what does that do? It really gives kind of some extra you know, it'll extend the usage of your media out, I think. Okay, so here we have that. I think that looks pretty cool. And these beams right here are really easy to do, of course. Okay, so we have that. I'm pleased to say that, I don't know, in my opinion, I think that works pretty good. Some of you might not like that, you know. I think it looks pretty interesting, though. Okay, I'm going to add in a little bit of extra tone around these trees, okay. I'm adding it around the objects that are the closest to that light source, so it kind of illuminates them and puts them in a little bit of a kind of a glowing light. Okay. Which would be a little bit more representative of the kind of light direction and source of light, okay? All right. So this tree down here, you can kind of put the branches on the right side of it in light. You can kind of illuminate the side of this tree, perhaps. Kind of depends how dark you made the background. My background isn't terribly dark. I mean, I put some black back there, but it was a very diluted black. You know, from having tapped it off all on the perimeter. Okay, let's see. Let's add a little bit of fog and mist. That's where that kind of that magic, you know, from kind of comes into play. I've mentioned this in another video, but oftentimes in movies you find people walking around in a forest background, and they have, if you notice, they kind of have that, you know, that smoke machine kind of running in the background, so they're walking through a forest, you know, and there's this kind of rolling fog in there in the background or something like that. It's not always, you know, to give it kind of a spooky feel, but it just makes it look more interesting to have this kind of this hazy background that looks beautiful when they illuminate it with all of the lighting effects and whatnot in the background. So the only difference is if they're doing it for like a haunted thing, then it's probably a, you know, a colored light instead of like a white light on it. Okay, and again, this is the Colorbox Frost White. Frost White is a little bit more translucent, doesn't give you a super whiteness, but for me, in this type of application, I like it like that. If you have some types of brands, sometimes they'll give you a much more white and quicker drying finish, and I kind of want mine to be a little bit slower drying, so it gives me time to kind of manipulate it and move it around. Ideally, what you do is you have both. If you want an area really white and stark white, then what you do is you use that over the top of this one once you kind of establish what you know you're kind of going for. Okay, this is my light source right in here, so I'm kind of adding a pretty good amount of this right in there. I don't want a big blob of it, of course, but I do want a fairly decent amount. Okay. Well, this is a stamped sketch, but I think it looks pretty nice as a somewhat of a, you know, I don't know, this looks like a finished piece to me. 2 tones of ink applied. I mean, you could tint this a little bit, put a little bit of blue or, I don't know, a warm tone over the top of this. This is completely grayscale, so you can add a warm tone to it if you want to. I don't know, it's really wide open. Okay, I'm going to add a little foreground in here. I really like this winter brush stamp lately as my kind of foreground element. I like the sharpness to it, and it's really quite airy, so it doesn't block off what's going on in the background, so you get the benefit of having something close to you without blocking off what's going on in the background. Okay, so there we have that. And there is light beams study number 2, okay? My first one I really liked, but this one I like as well. And I like the broken up kind of parts like that, where it just kind of comes out, doesn't go all the way out here. I think that looks good. Just a hint of one, it's a very light one up here. See that? Okay, so I think vary your beam intensity is what I would say. And I think that'll give you a little bit more of a varied, kind of interesting look to your scene. Okay, so what did that take? 30 minutes there, I think. And no, I stopped at one point in time, so. But pretty fast and easy. I don't know. Once you start laying in those beams, it's it's easy going. And if you don't like it, like I said, with the color box ink, you can just wipe it right off, and then lay down accordingly. So, just as I said that, you can add a few little highlights on things with your white gel pen too. Kind of bring some areas to life. You can put a few little highlights on, the side of the tree that's kind of getting hit with some of the light beam too. Kind of brings a little bit of life into your compositions as well, or into certain areas of the composition. Do it on the side of the objects that are facing the light, okay? Alright, so I really like the look of this, and I will attempt to not employ this technique into every scene that I do from now on, but I don't know, it's pretty fun to add that in there. That's an effective look, I'd have to say. I mean, this scene would look okay just without those light beams, but you take those light beams away, and I don't know. It's a different spirit to the scene altogether, I would think. I don't know. I still have some things to play around with and take a look at some different experiments to do with those beams there, but there's that gel pen, by the way. You can see it on some of my trunks here. See on the sides of the tree, that's facing the light, okay? Same thing right here on this side of the tree, facing the light. Right up here I put a little bit of highlights around right there because it was on that side. So, and there's some little highlights down there in the forest floor, so, oh boy. Another technique, perhaps, that you can utilize in your scenes, and it works just fine on glossy cardstock, so happy to report that, and I don't know, more to come. We'll have to see. Hopefully you give that a try. That is just too fun to never use, I think. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for looking at the channel, and I'll have these on the website and some photographs of it on the Flickr site too. So if you have any questions, drop us a note.